Let's look at our next category of attacks, and these are even more dangerous. Chopping. What are we talking about with chopping? Again, we're talking about a two-handed swing, but with something even heavier and often held overhead. That would be something like an axe or spades, because they have a sharp edge as well. Statistically, these are less common, but they're even more dangerous and they're even more difficult to defend. That's why we need to look at this specifically, because now you have the added weight, the added length, and often there's an extrusion, a head coming out, which makes it even more dangerous to deal with. Let's look at some of the defenses. All right, let's look now at the chopper, the overhead attack. Once again, in schools that do impact weapon defenses, they do a lot of overhead attacks. Statistically, overhead attacks are relatively common, an actual direct overhead. The most common human angle that we talked about is more of a downward 45 or a cross 45, like we did with the two-handed and one-handed swings. However, the one time that there are downward strokes, and they're quite dangerous, is when we're using even heavier two-handed implements, such as an axe, spade, which has an edge on it similar to an axe, and other kinds of heavy implements that may have an extrusion, a head on the end. So this isn't exactly an axe, but it's very similar. Now the problem with this is not only you've got the added weight and a two-handed swing, but you've got now a 90-degree extrusion on the end. So it's more difficult to defend if something like this was traditionally done. Not that this would be very effective to begin with, but you can see the added problem. You've now got a 90-degree attack thing here. Very much like the battle axes of old that were used in the Middle Ages. All right, let's look at the principle here. As he winds up overhead, most of the danger is between his arms. So in this case, there's no point trying to go between his arms. It's a lot safer to go on the outside. So as he begins to swing, my arms are going to come up, and I'm going to use a similar kind of entry. The difference is, swing, I'm stepping to the outside. The stepping is fairly basic idea. It's skill in itself, but it's not a hard one to acquire. The idea is I just have to step off try to step off at 45. There's two things happening here at the same time. The first one is, as I step off, it also carries my head. So even if I'm late, my head stays over my lead knee, and I'm getting a nice 45-degree angle here. Now, more importantly is the sliding block. As it comes down, I want to keep my arm rigid against the side of my head, and the second one can act as a support hand. Now, if you do this slowly or quickly, it looks like I'm pushing it away. I'm not. If I try to time this, there's a chance that I'm going to open up a gap between my head and my arm, and that could be the gap that's going to open up and get my head split, part my hair. So as he winds up and swings, I just keep this arm in place, and if I'm late and I make contact with his arms or with the weapon itself, it's going to slide right down my arms instead of making contact at a right angle. That's why something like this is really dangerous. Even if this head wasn't here, this kind of 90-degree impact is going to shatter this arm. But a sliding block like this lets the force dissipate. So I have two lines of defense here. As he winds up, I step out and I let the sliding blocks do my work. This one stays in place, but this one might be able to push a little bit if I'm late, since it's the support hand. Now as we slide off, we're going to end up in exactly the same place we did before. I have the same two options as I did with the two-handed swing. Now with the heavier weapon, I want to make sure I get a lot of torque here, but the disarm's the same. And now I've got the weapon, or I can go to the clothesline. Okay, late defense is the same. At this distance, where this axe-like device can reach me, I don't have a lot of time to play. If I'm late, he's already half or three-quarters of the way through this stroke. Let's say half, three-quarters, I may not even have the time. There's no way I'm going to be able to enter. I need to both enter and change level. So as he begins to drop that and comes forward, I go into my Suki Nagi again, which is basically just very much like a hip check in hockey. I'm hitting him low and hitting his legs, and he'll go over top if I do that fast enough. It's identical to the other one. Not difficult to do, but we have to train it a lot. We have to get out of that natural instinct to try and back up. If he's halfway through that swing and I start doing this with or without the flinch reflex, you know what's going to happen. It's going to split my hair and part my hair and split my head. So as he winds up and comes forward, he's coming right to me. I move my head to the outside. I have a good base here. My hands would grab here. I would straighten up and lift him and throw him right over top. Once again, if you look at how hockey players back in the old days when hip checking was still a skill, and you saw how they go under and lift a guy right over them, it's exactly the same concept, and it works slick as snot on a door handle if you practice it. All right, so drilling, the same idea. We're going to give a give-take kind of drill. The idea is when you see somebody rise up overhead like this, start training yourself to understand that you don't want to go between the arms. As he steps out to one side, you can do it with just a footwork at first, and then he comes back, and then you can add the sliding block. Yeah, a two-hand one's a better idea. As he comes forward, he's going to end up doing the same disarm, come all the way forward, wrap my arms over top, weave them through, and do the same disarm. Twist this way. Yep, he gets the weapon in his hand, he rises up, I try to enter, I come here. Remember, I trap this the same way as we did for clubbing attacks, but I weave my arm in here and I figure four. Remember, we're using this bar for safety, but with an axe or a large spade, it's going to be quite heavy, so I need to put my whole body weight. But look, hold on tight here. Look what this arm is doing to his arms. They're twisting him and making him a lot weaker. Then I've got it under my armpit again. I switch, and remember, we're imagining this is an axe. There's a moment where you have to heft it up. That's the best time to enter because you're early. Keep running forward, boom. Make sure you get all the way through that danger zone. He rips it out, if you can remember, but he hasn't practiced this one, so he's doing okay. All things considered, he tries to swing, boom. Again, look how I suck up on it. This one weaves his arms, because with one action, I'm pushing this one down, this one up. This figure four is just to combine everything. I can twist it out really efficiently. Then I'm back to here. Oh, what if I switch in the middle of the game and I do this one? What's the entry on the, yeah, that's right, boom, and then he rips it out. Now maybe he does a batter up instead of an overhead chop. Same thing can happen. Sometimes I can disarm with one. Now I go to the axe attack. Keep moving, get chest, don't disarm right away. Hit chest to chest, because you have other options. What if you want to continue to go to the clothesline, for example? Yeah, put your hip behind mine. Choke from behind, same idea. Okay, but it's nicer to do it the other way. So again, we're just going to a back and forth drill. This cuts down the lag time and forces you to respond right away, and you end up doing way more repetitions, even if you're doing it slowly, because you don't have to keep stopping, picking up the weapon, talking about dinner, whatever. You just get a rhythm going and you keep feeding each other back and forth, and by the time you realize that you've done 100 reps that training session, that's the way to get good fast.